What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Liam Picks Fights. Today, I'm very excited to be breaking down the Dana White's Contender Series, week number 9. Once again, back with my two guys, NarcoCop, Gordo Gambles, the same crew. We've been rotating YouTube channels. We're back on my channel this week to talk about an excellent card. We've got a 17-year-old prospect, something that you've never seen on the Contender Series, a first, in a show that has a lot of iterations, a lot of seasons. We're not going to come across that many more firsts. Here's another one, 17-year-old coming onto the show, and should be exciting matchmaking. Both guys that like to hunt that submission, two very potent grapplers. So I'm excited to see how they match up, and we've got a lot of other great fights as well. So without further ado, let's bring the great guest that you're waiting for, my man, Gordo Gambles. Welcome back, brother. How are you today?
Woo! 2 weeks left Dana White Contender Series, and boy, am I pumped. I mean, we waited to the last minute because we got to get my Bills a nice little win in there yesterday. So happy we're able to do it still. Nice 6 p.m. stream, 2 hours before the fight start. Hopefully we're on the same side because all my bets are locked in, and it's time to make some money.
I absolutely love to hear that, brother. I'll tell you what, your Bills ran all over me yesterday. If Derrick Henry didn't score a touchdown in the early going, I probably would have had to stop watching NFL football. So for me, I'm just glad to get through the game unscathed in the end. But, man, brutal beatdown from the Buffalo Bills. Shout out to those guys. They put it on us. NarcoCop, welcome back, brother. How are you today?
What's up, bro? Ready to go. Trying to bounce back here. It's been a rough year in Dana White's Contender Series, but let's see if we can turn this around.
Tell me about it, man. I think I went from a 10-0 last year to like an 0-6 to start us off this year. So hadn't been doing great last week. The week before started to pick it up. So I'm excited. Feel like I have some momentum. One on the UFC this weekend as well. So I'm ready to get back to work tonight. And, I basically zoned in my betting strategy for this to a couple fights. But I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say. Maybe you pushed me over the edge on some of the fights that I wasn't quite as interested in betting. But without further ado, we can start at the bottom of today's card, and we're going to be working out of the flyweight division. This is one of the more interesting matchups on the card, in my opinion. I'm kind of shocked that it was this low relative to some of the other fights on here. But the UFC with those flyweight matchups, they like them to go first before most people have sat down to watch the television program. But in either case, I think this should be really exciting. You got Jafel Filho on the one side. He's got a really impressive win over Vinicius Salvador on his resume. Salvador, you guys might remember, beat Shannon Ross on an earlier edition of the Contender Series, and I actually was one of the few people on Vinicius Salvador in that spot, I will say. But I will also say that, this was a guy that beat him. So that's a really impressive win to have on your resume. However, this is a guy that's lost as well some fights, including by submission, which Echeverria, to say good things about him, I mean, obviously he's very skilled. He's got a lot of power. He's got some potency, even in the grappling and submission exchanges. He got hurt in his last fight and fought through it, was able to earn the split decision there. I thought that could have been a unanimous decision. It was a close fought contest in the end, but I thought he won the second and third rounds there. And he responded well to adversity. I like to see that. But he's pretty untested overall. His opponent has double the pro experience here, so I can understand why he's favored. Do I think it's a little wide? I think it's a little wide. I would probably have a slight lean towards a dog or pass situation. But I do think that, fight to end by sub is also something I was kind of interested in this matchup. I do think they could bang it out on the feet, but I think that Filho has a pretty developed submission game that from everything that I've seen. And I would not be surprised if he's pursuing takedowns early and often in this fight, especially if he gets hit with that power. Because I do think he has some good striking technically, but I think a lot of the guys that he was hitting on the regional scene kind of folded up a little bit. Vinicius Salvador wasn't one of them. He fought to the bitter end there, but I think that, this is the kind of guy that, could provide a lot of resistance. Goat Shed gets a lot of love. They got a lot of good grapplers that come through that gym. And I went through the pictures. He's been working with a lot of really good guys on the ground. I think he might be able to defend some of those subs. He might be able to scramble out and attack with his own. And I just think he might be a little bit more dynamic at this stage of their careers. It's a great match fight, but I would lean slightly towards the dog from a betting angle here. Gordo, how do you feel, brother?
Yeah, I tend to agree with a lot of sentiments you're putting out. This fight kind of reminds me of the Marcos fight from last week. In the very first fight of the night, once again, you have a guy who is relatively untested, a lot of question marks about him, and therefore, because we don't know much about him, he is lined a dog. We know a lot more about the Jafel Filho side. We've seen him face resistance. We've seen him fight some higher level competition, and I think that's why people are evolving towards him. I think when it comes to a complete skill opportunity, especially in the striking exchange, I think I'm going to give the advantage to the dog here in Echeverria. I think that if we look at it from a broader spectrum, though, I think this is a fight where, despite there maybe being value on the side, they're right. He is untested. There are some things we still need to know from this side. So I think it's a spot where I'm more so targeting violence. I know it is, they're smaller guys, but I do think this is a really good chance of finishing inside the distance. A line is, it's lined accordingly, in my opinion. I think that not only is Echeverria going to have the ability to put some hands of Filho on the feet, but like you mentioned, that submission game is also there. I think that it's going to be a really volatile spot. And I think you're going to hear me saying it much throughout the card that I think this is a card more centered towards violence than it is really showing up prospects. And this is a card where you're really just trying to make it oriented towards people going to sleep rather than show kicking some higher level talent. This is another spot where I'm taking some violence in this spot. I'm on the fight doesn't go, but I think gun to my head, you want me to make a decision? I'm taking the dog. And although he is untested, I think that it goes out there and puts that undefeated record, adds another one to the title there, and takes out Filho this weekend or Tuesday.
Yeah, man. I feel the same way. Definitely tonight. It's going to happen tonight, Gordo. So make sure you're watching. But I think that, he's kind of lost most of the step ups in competition. He faced Brunno Ferreira in 2014. He lost that fight. Luan Matthews, a little bit more tested prospect on his resume. He loses that fight. So then I just think that this is another kind of step up in competition. Yes, there's been not a lot of competition for Echeverria to face, but you listen to the commentary on all the fights, and they're talking about the fact that nobody wants to fight him. They can't get people to sign with Titan, or like basically anybody on their roster to want to fight him. So they're giving him these guys that are willing to say, yes, he fought the same guy twice. Like, like those kind of things, to me, I don't love to see that, but I just think that overall there's not a high level of competition for him to fight there. So every fight they're talking about him stepping up to the UFC, him stepping up in competition. So I think those were more grooming fights just to get him some experience, some cage time, spend a little time out there. And I do think he passed a little bit of a test in that last fight. You look at Filho on the other hand, I was impressed that he hasn't lost a fight since 2017. And then I realized, I'm like, oh, he's only fought 4 times since 2017. This other kid has been extremely active. He's been fighting a lot. He's been fighting, multiple times over. So I think that's the kind of thing, the activity, the presence in the cage that might make up for that gap in experience. He's just been doing this a lot more. Narco, how do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much agree with a lot of what you guys said. Looking at this fight, I was kind of interested initially on the Roybert side. The line has been moving up, so I'm just going to wait. I do believe I'm going to eventually bet Roybert here. The concern here is obviously Filho, he goes for those takedowns. He's relentless with them. And for sure, he's the much better submission grappler here. But there's 2 things I looked at here that kind of stuck out to me that are, I believe, a little important. One, Roybert is working with really, really good grapplers of late. I also had somebody tell me he's working with Nick Rodriguez lately. So I don't know how true that is, but
Ethan Krelestein is in his photos. They roll together.
I would not be surprised if
they drove there together.
And he said he's been really working with Nick Rodriguez of late. So that's a good feather in his cap. 2, he's really been active, which I really, really like. Filho, I mean, 1 fight in 3 years, guys. That's kind of mind-boggling for a guy that's, pretty young. I mean, he's 29 years old. He's only had 1 fight in 3 years. The 1 fight against Vinicius Salvador where it says, ground and pound. Vinicius Salvador, honestly, takedown defense is not very good. And if you don't have very good takedown defense, Filho usually wins, right? He can get you down, get you to where he wants to do work. Honestly, with Roybert watching his fights, his first layer takedown defense is very, very good. He looks extremely strong and explosive. Another very, very important aspect I think you need to look at here is Filho historically has fought at 35. He's fighting down to 25 now. In his only 2 losses, they're both at 25. I think he's a big dude for 25. I do think that when you look at Mateus' fight, and if you watch that fight, he was completely gassed by the third round. I mean, he was done. He gave up, got the rear naked choke. And I honestly think round 3 here for Roybert is the nuts, man. I really believe that. Unless Roybert ices him early, I do think Roybert has a huge striking advantage. He's the much, much cleaner striker. Very good combos. I love his combinations. Very good footwork. The much quicker guy. I like a lot about Roybert. It's just about survival here, like with takedowns and stuff, right? If he's to stop takedowns, he is the much better striker. And honestly, he's had very, very good cardio. The Waskar fight was pretty active, and he was showing very good cardio in that fight in the third round. I can't say the same thing for Fialho. He looked horrendous in the Mateus fight in the third round. And guess what? That was at 25. And I do believe the weight cut is actually hurting him here. And so with that being said, I'm going to get in on Roybert at some point. Roybert KO to me looks pretty good because I think he's the much, much better striker. And even in the Mateus fight, like Mateus hurt Fialho, I think, in that fight too, on the feet. So for me, I'm going to go with Roybert. I'm just waiting on this line. And then round 3, I have a bet on round 3 at plus 1,800. I really like the round 3 prop here. I think if Fialho's not successful, he's going to gas, man. And I think he's going to gas pretty hard. So I'm on the same side with Roybert and some round 3 props.
Yeah, and even you look at the way that the guys went down to some of those strikes on the regional scene. I mean, it was literally a right straight to the body that put one guy down. I'm like, if you're in the UFC and you can't take a hard right straight to the body, you got to pick a new profession. That's just, it's just the way it is. So I kind of thought that was indicative of the level of opponents he was fighting. And that for me gives a little bit of strength to the underdog. Honestly, I'm tempted right now at the plus 160 that's showing. It's basically off market at that price everywhere else. So I might have to hit that for a bet. In fact, I just hit that for a bet for whatever it's
worth. Where is it 160?
It's on Bet Online.
Oh, it just moved to 160. Beautiful. I think I'm in with you here.
I just hit that, and I'm looking at this prop market for 1 second, and Echeverria by sub is plus 1,800, and that's a little disrespectful. So I'm gonna have to put that to win my area code, and we'll move on from there. But great fight. I'm expecting a lot of fireworks there. And this fight, I'm going to pass off to my guest because the truth be told is I basically pick one Contender Series fight to ignore each week. And it's the one with the massive favorite. And it's because, my only way to get an edge in that market is to look at the props. And I do think I may end up looking at the prop market, if anything, on the favorite here because I saw Wick and he just did not look like an athlete to me. So unless you guys could do a really good sell job, he just looked like somebody who was like, confused as to why he was there, and it looked like he had a little bit of dad bod going on. Does he have a narrative here? Does he have a case? Gordo, I ask you first, brother. What do you got?
Yeah, this is like earlier I said, it was going to be a spot where we're going to see more violence rather than showing people up. Well, this is the exception to the rule. I think this is a spot where they're just trying to show up a prospect. I do think the line is wide, but at some point it becomes justifiable because I think you got a guy in Aliev who has a clear path to victory. I didn't like what I saw from tape off of Josh Wick, especially off his back and being able to be controlled. And although Aliev is young, he seems to be making all the right decisions. He's shooting right away in a lot of his fights, and he's going out there and he's really implementing his game plan, imposing his will on other people. The one question mark I do have about him is we've seen him be more so a decision fighter, a point fighter, control time, not really going to be an active finisher on the spot. But is that going to change in a Dana White Contender Series spot? Is that going to be a spot where he sees Dana there and he looks to make these risky moves he hasn't made earlier to go and get that contract? That's where I don't know. That's where I kind of like to stay away from the prop market. And I know that's not what you want to hear because if you are going to target this one, props probably the way to go. But there's a lot of variables in this spot. You have to think that the fighter that we see on tape is going to win a decision. That is most likely path to victory. He's not a big finisher. He's a control grappler. But is that going to change with Dana there? I don't know. I think that the line for decision is too wide because the finish definitely on the table. Although I can't be the type of guy to really push you towards a dog. Pick's going to be Aliev, and I think he keeps that perfect record intact.
I like it. What do you think, Narco? Is there life to our friend Wick?
Yeah, I honestly don't see much life. The problem is not that honestly, I wasn't super impressed with Aliev. Like he just shows no finishing ability in some of these fights, which is kind of he's happy to sit and guard. He's happy to, just go to decision and ride. He's throwing some punches. He is throwing ground and pound, but it's nothing like vicious. He doesn't have this killer instinct that I like to see from some of these Dagestanis, some of these Russians. This guy's from Tajikistan, but but Josh Wick, like takedown defense just doesn't look good. The one thing you like with Aliev when you're backing guys like this is you can count on this guy to wrestle. Like he's gonna wrestle from minute 1 to minute freaking 15. He's nonstop wrestling in every single fight. There was some things I didn't like from him, like against the Grebnov fight. He was kind of slowing down at the end there. Grebnov was kind of catching him a little bit. He's fought, these guys, even though they look like they have good records, feel like they're not very good, to be honest. I couldn't find tape. I don't know if you guys did, of his majority decision win over this Zainakov guy, but I couldn't find that tape. I really wanted to see what happened there, why it was a majority decision. But, outside of that, like, what are you looking for? Who do you look to back? You're looking for guys like this, right? Wrestlers, nonstop. I mean, not much finishing ability, it seems like, but he's going to wrestle his ass off. And Josh Wick has shown vulnerability to the wrestling against Jason Fisher, against, Johnny Nunez, against a bunch of these guys, Dan Moret, like all these guys just took him down pretty easily. On the feet, he is the better striker. Josh Wick is. I mean, he has a pretty good calf kick. Seems like he's well-versed in the striking, but he's not going to keep this on the feet. I can just tell you that right now. And I mean, he does throw up submissions, but I just don't see it, man. It's probably Aliev. I played Aliev by decision, which is a huge mistake. I played it early. Just take fight goes to decision. It's minus 135, and Aliev by decision is minus 120. It's 15 cents off. Like, makes no sense to play Aliev by decision at minus 120. So fight goes to decision on DraftKings, minus 135. I think it gets there. The one thing about Wick is he's never been finished. And the other thing about Aliev is he honestly doesn't get many finishes. So fight goes to decision, minus 135. I don't think it's a bad look.
I tend to agree with you, man. But I will say this. The guy looks like Khabib. He's got a ton of followers. They're definitely putting him in a setup fight, it would seem, right? You don't think he could get a finish over this guy in that kind of scenario? I do think that's the one thing where I'm like, big favorite. Those are the lines in men's MMA that normally do tend to correlate more with finishes as well.
I would agree with you, and I honestly would play that. It's just that he's faced actual pretty good, like Dan Moret is a pretty good guy that had him grounded and did go for the finish, but couldn't finish this guy. And he's faced good opposition. He's had a win over Vince Morales, who's in the UFC. It's not like if he faced like bad fighters and survive, like I could see it. Like he's actually faced UFC level opponents and survived. So seeing a guy that, God dang, I would want to see more from Aliev. That's all. Like he just doesn't look like he likes to finish.
I understand. He's only 22 years old, and I have heard Daniel Cormier talk about these guys that are coming up and they kind of need to learn to develop that meanness, that comes with being a grizzled old vet of the game. If he ever loses a fight by finish, I bet he comes back pretty mean. It's like, that's kind of the way it goes. But I like where your head's at. Inexperienced, fighting in front of the bright lights, in front of Dana, not a lot of fights under his name. So maybe he does just take the easy win, ride out the wrestling. We've seen that a ton. And that would make a plenty of sense to me. So we can move along here to the next fight. This is an interesting one, in my opinion. You got the return of Austen Lane. A couple seasons back, my man got nuked, unfortunately, by Greg Hardy on his run of shame through the UFC. I'm kidding, of course, but NFL versus NFL, that was the sell to that fight. Two football players, two college football players as well. And, he got bested in that fight. And I thought it was interesting. I found an article from February on the UFC that said Austen Lane, like rebuilding himself into a fighter, and it was basically like he kind of just came as a raw athlete into the game, and now he's kind of refined his skills. And granted, you go back and you watch the Juan Adams fight, you see there's some problems still. There's some holes in the game. There's some things that need to be worked on. But there was also a lot of grit, and there was also a lot of, interesting things. He's a heavyweight looking for leg entanglements and trying to like work from the bottom of half guard. And then he finds a sweep on Juan Adams, gets on top. He had top control for a little while in that fight. And he also just butchered him every time they were on the feet with respect. Like he just had the faster hands. He looked to be the much crisper puncher, and he was finding better angles. He was hitting uppercuts. He was hitting more diverse strikes. He's a heavyweight that was throwing a head kick. I was like, whoa, there's something to see here. Now, that being said, his opponent on the other side, he does have a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu purple belt. He does come from a kickboxing background, but I'll be frank, I thought he was fighting bus drivers on his regional scene. I did not think that I was very impressed by a lot of these guys. I don't think one of his opponents will match the athleticism of somebody like Austen Lane at all, frankly. And so for that reason, I have a lot of open questions. Austen Lane looks to be the much more physically imposing guy. I don't know that we have an official reach comparison between these guys, but I know from a height standpoint, Austen Lane is about the same size as him. But I mean, they didn't look like the same kind of guy. He looked like a lot more physical and athlete. And Austen Lane, he is 34. He's not a young man by any means, but when you're talking about somebody who's coming into the UFC's heavyweight division, he would probably decrease the average age. So it's like, I don't know that Austen Lane is too old to be a heavyweight. You know what I mean? Whereas this other guy, I can see him developing into a fighter, but he's had all of his fights very recently against bus drivers. So I'm just thinking to myself, maybe he's good, but I don't know if he's as good as advertised. And I would kind of be thinking that Austen Lane might be the side here. Gordo, how do you feel, brother?
Yeah, 34 isn't that old until you realize how old Rojas is, right? So anyways, this is a spot where I looked at the line pre-tape and I'm like, oh, there's no way I'm betting Lane at chalk. I remembered it, and then I did the tape, and it was like, he's not looking as bad as he should, or as bad as we thought he was recently. He's looking to make improvements. He's still young in his MMA career. But there's a lot of question marks. And I told myself I wasn't going to bet this fight. But when the props dropped and Jacobi's knockout was as wide as it was, and Jacobi by KO was around the plus 265 mark, for me, that's his win condition. I think when we look at this fight as a whole, I think that the better mixed martial artist, the more physically opposing guy, the guy with the more paths of victory, the guy who's going to be winning the minutes is going to be Lane. And I think that Lane is going to be the rightful favorite in the spot. Maybe not the minus 200 that he was, but at this minus 130 range, I do think that Lane is the type of guy to go out there, win minutes, and probably find a finish in the spot. But what's the big concern we have on him is we've seen him rocked multiple times. We've seen him controlled. Like, again, the control doesn't really matter in this spot here because I don't think Jacobi's going to shoot too many takedowns, but we've seen him rocked. And I think that's the major win condition for Jacobi. So I ended up playing the spot. I played Lane money line at minus 137. And then I took the KO on the other side. Covers both options, in my opinion. I think that not only does Lane have more finish equity in the spot, but he also has decision equity. So I took his money line, hedging out of that completely with the Jacobi KO. That way I win some money either way. The only way I lose cash is if Jacobi wins a decision or submission, which I don't think is that plausible. So I took the safer route in the spot. I do think the official prediction is going to be a Lane. I think that he is the much better mixed martial artist. I wasn't a fan of what I saw from Jacobi. I don't understand the steam too much, but I think that there are better ways to target this.
I absolutely love it, guys. Check out Furio on Twitter. This guy's very sharp, very humble as well. But the guy's been an absolute killer, just like sweeping the board on multiple sports. I know he went down on that plus 10 Titans. I went down on it too, brother. But overall, this guy has been absolutely crushing. So shout out to him. Shout out to you, brother. Welcome. But just wanted to say, I think he's got a point there about Lane winning minutes on the feet. If he's doing that, he's probably going to look like a hindsight bigger favorite. I do think the kickboxing credentials are the fact that, this guy can go out there and throw high kicks, body kicks. He can mix it up a little bit as well. But I just overall wasn't as impressed by his athleticism. I think if anything, trying to mix in that purple belt, get on top of this guy, Lane did seem a little bit content to stay on his back and play jiu-jitsu. That I think is a criticism from the Juan Adams fight, but that was 5 rounds to work, and I think that is something that we're going to have to see, if he can improve on his urgency. Dana White Contender Series is about urgency. You got 15 minutes to do something impressive or you might not get that call. So that being said, guys, we've got a really impressive fight up next. Shout out to Raul Rosas Jr. Did I not give my man Narco a chance to rip off there? Please, my man, fire away.
It's all right.
I was trying to be quick for you. You know what I mean?
No, yeah, that's cool. I just want to give a little bit stats on Austen Lane in case people like. First off, he's 6'6", and it says this other guy's 6'4". When you look at face-offs, his other guy's 6'2", probably.
Rosen strike height.
Yeah, and I'm being generous. Austen Lane, which is this guy was drafted in the NFL. He started 9 games as a rookie for the Jaguars. Bro, this guy is a freak athlete. He ran a 4.58 40 at 6'6", 280 pounds. That's pretty fucking freakish, if you ask me. This guy had a 36-inch vertical for a guy that fucking big. I mean, this guy's a freak athlete. Like watching Jacobi, like you guys say, like this guy, I mean, they say he's a Muay Thai striker. Like, I don't see, dude. I honestly think Austen Lane might be the better striker. The one thing, and this is a caveat to all of this, is I think Austen Lane is terrible defensively. And what I mean by terrible is that every time someone's throwing strikes, he thinks his height helps him, and he kind of like pulls back his head and sticks up his chin in the air. Like it's very scary. Like honestly, it's inviting for a big punch to land. And I hate seeing that from him. But outside of that, like athleticism, cardio, look at the cardio in that fight against Juan Adams. Like he looked fresh in the 4th round and he got Adams out of there, who, talk about whatever you want about Juan Adams, but he's better than all those guys this guy has fought put together. Like you said, this guy has fought nobodies. Majority decision against, draw against this last guy. And the only reason he got a draw is because a point was taken from this other Hygo Silva guy. So it wouldn't have been a draw. He probably would have lost that fight, but it became a draw because a point was taken from Silva in that 2nd round. But, going back to this fight, like Austen Lane, I just think is better overall. He's the better mixed martial artist, more athletic. Yeah, he's a little bit older, but Jacobi just looks so fucking slow on the feet. I don't know, man. This guy doesn't look UFC material. Austen Lane, not saying he's like great, but guy just does everything better in my opinion. On the feet, he's gonna torch this guy in my opinion, even though this guy's a Muay Thai guy. So even in his last fight, like I said, Hygo Silva was getting the best of him a lot of times on the feet. So do with it what you may, but I have a bet on Austen Lane minus 128 here.
Absolutely love it. What is going on here?
Wouldn't be a Dana White Contender stream without technical difficulties, right?
Yes, sir. Okay, just making sure that I didn't bounce you out of here. My man Gordo's back in a jiff. But now we can move to the next fight on the card here. And this one's fantastic in my view. You got Raul Rosas Jr. And 17 years old. I mean, absolutely better than what I was doing at 17 years old, still losing wrestling matches to, local high school kids. And I must say, he's been competing against real guys in grappling. I mean, Gianni Grippo is real in grappling, simple, plain and simple. That guy's dangerous, frankly. And the fact that he survived to an overtime period with him is impressive to me. I went back and watched his other grappling matches. The kid can scramble. He's super aggressive. He can easily pass the guard of a lot of people. And he's done it in his fights. He's constantly pursuing the takedown and getting it pretty easily. And granted, there's going to be some leveling up in the physicality that he's going to need to continue to do over the course of his career. However, you look at that Mo Miller fight, and I thought that Mo Miller was pretty easily throwing around his opponent here, Mando Gutierrez. And we saw, I mentioned this actually, if you guys remember, if you go back and watch, you'll see it too. But I mentioned the fact that they passed on him when Mo Miller was on the Contender Series and beat Brandon Lewis. And they brought back Brandon Lewis. So I said, I don't think that they're bringing back Brandon Lewis as a guy they believe in. I think they're bringing him back as a guy they want to feed to somebody they believe in. Same kind of thing Where here, this is a guy that got submitted by Mo Miller, not beat up for 3 rounds like Brandon Lewis. He got submitted in the second round. He basically was, I don't want to say giving up, but what happened was like 2 or 3 or 4 times in a row, he turned to the turtle position, which is where he's the most dangerous from, which is where he kept trying to get to put in his body triangle and go for the choke. So eventually, I think he was getting tired. He was trying to get back up to his feet and getting more desperate and just putting his hands down and trying to build back up and gave up his neck, and I think that if you do that against Raul Rosas Jr., he will snatch up your neck and take it home. He is a very dangerous submission threat in my view, and he is aggressive. He might slip on a position and he'll keep attacking, keep trying to get back up to his feet. And I think he's a scrapper. I don't think he's just a regular 17-year-old kid. I don't think he's just some slouch. And I think from a strategic point of view, I don't know that the UFC's business interests are in bringing in a 17-year-old to get beat up on their TV program. You know what I'm saying? I don't think they would bring him in if they thought he wasn't ready. So I think that they believe he's ready. I looked at his tape. I believe he's ready for a step up in competition. I'm not saying he should jump right into the top 10 in the UFC and none of those things. He needs a lot of time to develop physically. You don't want to rush in there with guys that are bigger, stronger, been doing it 20 years. That's a real problem. But I don't see that on the other side. He's got 2 more professional fights. The fights that he's losing against Mo Miller, he got completely dominated. He was easily out-wrestled. And the commentary's talking about he loves to play off his back. And he was doing a good job. He threw up some very, potent submissions of his own. So one of the fight angles that I like here, if you have access to DraftKings, I personally do not, but I might have a little birdie, I'll drive over the border and place a bet potentially. But I like the fight ends by sub at plus 100 for just a little bet, not a huge bet, but just because I feel like that gives you an out on both sides. The other guy's going to be looking for subs. He's going to get taken down in my view. So then it comes down to, all right, we've got to fight on the ground. We got 2 guys aggressively hunting for submissions. Somebody could easily get submitted. However, want to point out Just Win Baby, very sharp capper that I talk to, that I deal with. So if you are looking to, sharpen up, I think he is a very sharp capper. And one of the things he pointed out was the KO was plus 900 on Bet Online, which I was like, wow, that's kind of an aggressive number, because we talk about it all the time, positional TKOs. If I could get to a dominant position where I'm looking for a sub, I could just as easily throw strikes and potentially end it that way. So I did take a small bet on that as well. Shout out to Big Bird, said the same thing in the chat. Thought that was a pretty good line myself. So I'm riding with you, brother. And overall, I just think that this is a great fight. It's a well-matched fight. I don't think Gutierrez is a slouch. I don't think he's going to give him an easy fight. I don't think he's going to necessarily lose in the first round. But I do think he's going to get finished here. I do think he is going to eventually concede to this pressure. And I think it's probably going to come in the first or second round. If I had to guess, I think it's most likely to be by submission. But I took a sprinkle on the KO line because the number was just a little too high for my liking. I think Rosas is the side. I bet his money line as well. So those are my thoughts on the fight. Narco, how do you feel?
Yeah, man, I've been hearing a lot about this, 17-year-old. He doesn't have man strength. He's not fully developed in the strength. Are these people watching this guy's fights? I get it. He's not fighting good fighters, but he's fighting men. I mean, he's fighting 32-year-old men, 27-year-old men, and he's absolutely ragdolling these guys. I mean, like you mentioned, this guy is grappling with high level guys and competing and sometimes winning against these guys. This guy is strong, man. On tape, he is immediately, and his shots are so good. He's immediately shooting for takedowns. He's not messing around. He knows where he's good at. He throws up a ton of submissions. When you look at Mando Gutierrez, to me, it's a huge red flag. And I keep saying it all week. It's a monster red flag if Mo Miller is getting a sub on you, because Mo Miller he's not a submission grappler. He's a wrestler, pure wrestler. That's it. And if that guy is getting a submission on you, then guess what? This guy, I think, is going to get a submission on you, to be honest. And, this dude is just really impressive. And again, you mentioned something. Is UFC bringing a 17-year-old to get his ass beat? I don't think so. The other thing is, look at the guy they're giving him. A guy that can be taken down on tape. You see it. You see it in his last fight against Matthew Elliott that, you know, he was taking Mando Gutierrez down. And now you're giving him this guy that is an absolute savage when it comes to wrestling and grappling. They're giving a tailor-made matchup, honestly. This guy, Mondo's, is not a great striker. He can grapple, but it's just his grappling is a tad lower than this dude. So I have Raul Rosas minus 150 for 3 units. I have Rosas by submission. I'm going to play more Rosas inside the distance. I just think he's it, man. This kid is really good. And obviously he's still young. It's going to take some time. I'm not saying he's going to compete in the UFC at this age right now, but we're talking about Contender Series, guys. And Mando Gutierrez got absolutely mauled by a previous guy that came on Contender Series that didn't make the cut, Mo Miller. I think he gets mauled again, dude. He really does get mauled again. And I like what I see from this Rosas guy.
I love to hear that we're on the same page, brother. Gordo, how do you feel about it?
Hey, dude, I love it. And it's a thing where not often do I get to talk about a guy who's a fighter younger than me. I think it's really fun to go out there and see a guy who's 17 years old go out here. And I think that's the first thing. That's the people that talk about the most. But 2 things here. First of all, if he was not 17, say he was 24, I mean, would what everybody's seeing on tape, would he not be an even bigger favorite? I think that the age right now here is being limited towards him. And then everything comes that you guys says. Are they going to bring on somebody who's going to lose? If he's not ready at 17 years old, the UFC is not going to bring him on. What looks better? A 17-year-old getting a win at Dana White Contender Series, or some 25-year-old guy beating up some 17-year-old? I mean, that doesn't look good enough to get a contract, right? Who are they showcasing here? Who do they want to get in? Who's the storylines around? Who are they promoting? It is Rosas here. And the big problem I have when you're backing these young guys who are incredibly skilled in the ground department, such as a Chase Hooper, well, they're not proactively getting it to the ground. They're not good enough wrestlers to get it there. They're lacking that strength. I don't see that from Rosas. Not only is he strong enough to get it there, he dominates when he's there. He shoots immediately. He knows exactly what he has to do. And it's not like he's too small for the division. I mean, he fights at featherweight. He's fought a lot of his fights at featherweights, and now he's here at bantamweight. He has the size. He has the wrestling. He has the jiu-jitsu. This is his spot. They're setting him up. I'm completely with you guys. I'm not as confident as you guys. I don't have that many units, and I'm only 2 deep on Rosas here, but I will be playing the submission. I think that it's his spot. They're showcasing him, and I think it's just a money train for them. 17-year-old, that's who they're promoting. I'm really, really excited for this fight. Actually, really, really excited for this fight. I just think Rosas gets him down early, submits him early on.
Love it. Love it. And somebody in the comments says, anyone uses PrizePicks? Yes. Shout out to the sponsor of this show, PrizePicks. Guys, if you're looking to get involved in daily fantasy, one of the easiest, simplest ways, PrizePicks. You don't have to play against a pool of, the sharpest guys out there. It's just them. They put out a number. You decide, do I like over? Do I like under? That's it. And it's for takedowns, significant strikes, fantasy score, all that. So if you're looking to get involved, promo code Liam, all the information you need is in the description box below you. So thank you very much for asking, brother. Now, next question is, who do we like in the main event, boys? And we've got Leon Aliu. He is taking on Brunno Ferreira. And, I want to hear, do we have to stop Brazilian hate? I like to stop Brazilian hate every so often as a betting strategy, and it makes me a lot of coin. But we've got Italian love over here, Albanian love over here as well. Cage Warriors love over here, a Fight Pass product, never forget. So I think there's a lot of interesting factors here, but I'm going to let the guest kick it off here. Narco, how do you feel about this fight? Yeah,
I mean, I really don't have a bet here. I am leaning Leon Aliu because, Brunno Ferreira looks, I want to say looks okay. I don't want to say he looks very good in the stand-up. I don't really like his stand-up. Doesn't look like he likes getting hit on the feet, but I will say, man, he looks very, very strong when he gets a hold of you. I mean, he is absolutely tossing these guys around when he gets a hold of them, and he looks very, very strong, very good on top. I mean, very good submission. I think he's a black belt, very good on the ground, good ground and pound as well. And, he is impressive once he gets it down there. I just don't like what I see on the feet. The other thing is he's fought, I mean, I guess decent guys in the regional scene. I wouldn't call him very good, to be honest. On the other side, though, Leon Aliu, like, I think he's faced a little bit better opposition. The James Webb win at Cage Warriors, you know, one punch, basically knockout, looked pretty good. However, in the Chad Hannacum fight, when you watch that loss, he got ragdolled for 3 rounds. And I hate seeing that. I hate seeing he was on his back about 12 minutes of that fight against the South African. And just takedowns came very easy for that South African. And I honestly could see the same exact thing happened here. If Brunno Ferreira did some tape study on this guy, he should be getting this fight to the ground and going to work. Aliu is not a slouch on the ground. He's pretty good himself. He has some submissions in his arsenal, but I just think Ferreira is the better submission grappler here. Looks to be a little bit stronger also. And one thing that I noticed, like Aliu in weigh-ins, he was so relieved to make weight, which was like, I'm assuming it was a tough cut. If you watch the weigh-ins real closely, he was literally he wanted to break down and cry because he made weight. So I don't know what kind of weight cut it was, but Brunno Ferreira just looks like a freak as far as strength is concerned. I just wanted to see more from him in the striking because I didn't really like his striking. So with that being said, is Aliu live? Yes, I think he's alive for a KO. I think he has a lot of power in his hands. But outside of that, like minute winning, I think Brunno Ferreira, just with the grappling, just seems to be like the much, much stronger guy here.
Yeah, and this is another situation where I felt like the strength of competition was a real open question for me. I wasn't really sure how competent a lot of these guys Ferreira is out grappling are, but it is in Brazil. So you'd like to think that a lot of them have some jiu-jitsu experience. Not the stereotype, but then, additionally, the Hulk, is his nickname. He looks like a little bit of a Hulk. He's got that broad shoulder, bigger back type of guy. So it wouldn't be surprising at all to see him get takedowns here against a guy coming out of the Cage Warriors scene. We've seen how that's turned out for a lot of guys in the UFC. That being said, I agree with Narco. I describe this as, a potential live underdog. The line's gone, very hard in the direction of the favorite here, right? It started, I believe, under like sub -200. It's now all the way out to the -270 or so range. Let me just double check at current odds. And we've got Brunno Ferreira -210 right now on DraftKings Sportsbook, best available. On a lot of books, it's gone all the way out to, -285, -275. So if you look, a lot of the sharper books, a lot of the books that get Dana White Contender Series right more often are shaded a little bit towards the underdog here. Aliu is down to +182 right now on Bet Online, according to these markets. So that's a pretty big discrepancy. Whereas you could get Aliu +220 on Bet365. So a lot of action, it seems like, coming in on this main event. And for me, it just feels like a pretty volatile fight. I'm not really extremely impressed with either guy. I don't know that either one of them is going to make a massive impact breaking into the UFC. You got a 33-year-old on the one side and a 29-year-old on the other side, but you need to have grappling in order to succeed. And like Narco mentioned, if you're getting taken down, if you're getting ragdolled really easily, it's going to be a problem. It's potential that there's been improvements made. Obviously, if you get ragdolled like that in your only professional loss, you're going to know what you need to work on in the gym. Has he been making those improvements? That's what we need to see from him here if he's going to be a live underdog, because you've got a guy who's got, more credible Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I believe I have in my notes here. I don't even have it. It just says in my notes that he's got all these wins in the first and second round. He's never been to a round 3. So even though he did get dominated in that fight, he did go to a decision. We did see 15 minutes out of him there. So I think that I would play the underdog or pass on this fight based on the current odds structure. But that's not with a tremendous amount of conviction. Gordo, how do you feel?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of love for Ferreira, and I get it. I do think he is the guy I'm going to pick to win this fight, but I'm not as impressed as everybody else. I think both these guys leave a lot to be desired, especially defensively. I think they're both very reckless fighters. And this is another spot where I think they're trying to prioritize violence. I don't think both these guys are necessarily going to have too bright of a future in the UFC. However, they bring fun fights. Like you said, Ferreira never been to the third round. They have fun fights. So I think it's another spot too where the reason they are in the main event is because they are violent fighters too. And we've seen, except for that Basharat fight, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think every single main event other than last week has ended inside the distance. And I think that this trend continues again this week. It's a spot where I like both these guys, but I think that Ali's going to have an opportunity to catch some defensive liabilities of Ferreira. But I think that if it goes to the ground at all, the Hulk may have an advantage there. So extremely volatile fight. Give me Ferreira to win the fight. However, I think more value lies in maybe the under. I know it's juiced, maybe even the under 1.5. However, but I think that a lot to be desired from both sides, and I just hope for a fun fight.
I couldn't have said it any better myself. And we have run right up to the time. We are just about at the 6 o'clock mark. I told my man Narco I would not keep him here past 6 p.m. So I think we did a pretty good job giving the people some angles, telling them where our head's at on all these fights, how we're approaching it. And, you know, it's right to these final closing lines. You can see a lot in this market. So I'm going to be watching the market the rest of the way. I wish you guys the very best of luck, whether you're riding with us or going against us. We appreciate you being here. 161 people rocking live with us today. So just wanted to shout out the sponsor of this program, OddsJam, PrizePicks, 2 services that I use and 2 services that if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me and ask about. I appreciate the question from Vito. He says Rosa's takedowns is at 1.5. I think that's a trap, my brother. I think it might be a 1 takedown and the fight is over shortly thereafter type of affair. But if it goes to the second round, I do think that you're going to cash that. So that's where it becomes a little bit of that 50-50 toss-up. They might have said it at just the right number there. Those guys at PrizePicks know what they're doing. But wanted to give my guests a chance to tell you where they're at, where you can find the great work that they're doing. So Narco first, if you could tell the people where they can find your work, brother.
Yeah, NarcoCop on Twitter, NarcoCopMMA on my YouTube channel. Every Friday, Lambo Plays podcast. Doing it again this Friday. Trying to add a little bit more content and stuff like that. But today, there's going to be no spaces, guys, live spaces for Dana White's Contender Series. I have to take my son to jiu-jitsu class. I have to do one on my own. So it's a new day. So I'm pretty excited to see what he's going to do. So yeah, guys, we'll be back Friday. Actually not this Friday because there's no UFC card, but I might actually do a Bellator stream for YouTube on this card. I do have a bet already. So I've been looking at this card.
I like it. I like it. Eagles 1985 says quick parlay. Echeverria, ITD, and Rosas Jr. ITD. Gordo, please tell the people where they can find you.
I was expecting Mushroom to be in the chat asking for these parlays, so I had them already. My big plus money one is same as you. Echeverria inside the distance, Rosa submission, and the under 1.5 main event plus 1,800. I think it is right now. That is a long shot one. I know someone else asked for a quick recap, and I know Narco's got to go, so I'm just going to say violence-oriented night. I also think Rosa wins, but it should be a fun day. I tweeted all my plays. You can find that all on Gambles Gordo on Twitter, Plays and Fade Sports on YouTube. Either way, enjoy the rest of your night, guys. Enjoy the fights, and hope you guys make some money.
I love it. That's the facts. And guys, right at that 7 p.m. mark here in the East, we are done.
Let me give him one parlay.
Roybert, I love it. Narco too. Drop that.
Roybert KO, Rosa submission on DraftKings. Plus 175, plus 350. Go for it.
I love it. I love it. So there you have it, guys. You got a quick parlay on the way out as well. Appreciate you guys for rocking with us. 173 people in the chat. Sharpest chat in the game. You know that. So appreciate you guys. We'll see you next time. No UFC this week. So we'll be back for the next Dana White Contender Series. And we'll announce everything on Twitter. So make sure you're following every one of us at Liam Picks Fights, at NarcoCop, and at Gordo Gambles. Thank you guys. God bless you all. Enjoy those fights. And we'll see you next time.